Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to wherever you are, or whatever time you may be watching this. Welcome to the 11th episode of the LVM podcast. My name is Rebecca Benny, and for today's episode, I will be reflecting on my grief of losing my mother to homicide and reintroducing what LVM Advantage is. So hey everyone, Happy New Year. I know it's technically, already the end of January, but it's still, the new year. This is still that awkward time where we still kind of get confused, whether it's 2021 or 2022. I'm still kind of stuck in 2020, if I'm going to be honest. I keep thinking last year was 2020. But anyways, besides the point, for those who may not know me, I have started the LVM podcast and LVM Advantage in order to raise homicide awareness. Just a quick reintroduction of what my story is, just for those who may not know. I lost my mother to homicide in 2014 as she was murdered by her coworker. During that time, I was 17 years old, literally starting my first week of high school as a senior. And, during that time, I'm still a teenager. I'm still at that stage where I'm about to start college. And because of the relationship I did not have with my mother, it caused me to avoid my feelings and just avoid thinking about her, talking about her, and avoiding my grief as a whole. And that was during the 6 years after losing my mother to homicide. But in 2020, I went through this period of reflecting about how I was doing my mother the injustice of not talking about her. I mean, it was difficult because, she pretty much didn't exist in my life. And she doesn't exist in my life anymore physically. And, I pushed all that out. And, I realized that those who are taken away by homicide should still be talked about, because if it weren't for the person who took their life away, they'd still be here with us. So what is LVM Advantage? LVM Advantage is specifically inspired by my mother's name, Luz Minda, referring to each syllable in her name. It also translates to loss versus mind, and which pretty much means that our losses, versus our mindset, our mental state. When we go through a difficult loss in life, it can bring us to a really dark place mentally, and that can really take over us. It takes over our lives, honestly, and it's draining. And I want, each person to know that, we have it within us to overcome that loss mentally. We have that strength within us to get through it. And the advantage part is inspired by the fact that my mother was taken advantage of. A lot of homicide victims are taken advantage of, and I wanted to turn that meaning around. I wanted to show that, things in life will take advantage of us. The losses that we have will take advantage of us. It puts us at a disadvantage. But, I want, people to know that, we are the only advantage that we need. So I want to reflect on 2021, the journey of LVM Advantage so far. The things that I have learned and gained from this page. So along with starting at LVM Advantage, which was already a huge step because I never spoke about my mother's death and losing her to homicide, and I never even talked about my feelings. Starting the LVM podcast was another major step, along with LVM Advantage, because I'm openly talking about my grief and what I'm going through, what I'm feeling. And it was difficult because I had to relive everything that I was going through during that time. I lost my mother, and it was weird. It was really weird. It was kind of a huge struggle for me and a challenge because I don't like being vulnerable. I'm still very hesitant when I talk, but it definitely was something that I needed, I should say, I think. I believe that things that challenge us are what make us grow And sometimes when we try something that we really aren't sure about, it actually, pushes us closer to what we really need to be focusing on, if that makes any sense. And, I'm still not perfect. Like, I still go through this, like, even to this day. 2022 is no different than last year. I'm still the same person. But it's important to know that we have to keep growing in order to, like, be a better version of ourselves. But, specifically about LVM Advantage and this page and, like, raising homicide awareness, I really learned a lot about grief. This is the oddest thing to say. It's like, I know what grief is, but I didn't really know what grief was till last year. It is the weirdest thing because a lot of things started making sense to me. Sometimes when you go through like a traumatic event in life, you kind of go through like this period where you're kind of numb and you push things so far out that you don't want to like deal with it. And that's pretty much what I went through. Like I literally did not grieve, my mother's death at all until I acknowledged her death pretty much. In the sense that like actually exclaiming it to the world. If I'm going to be honest, it's something that I technically haven't accepted as yet, but it's a process for me. I wasn't expecting to gain so much from starting LVM Advantage, and it's not only through like finding out more about myself, but like looking at other grief pages and meeting survivors through LVM Advantage. All of those survivors who are watching this right now, like I've learned so much from all of you because it's comforting to know that you're not alone in how you feel, because it can be really lonely. Like death is like pretty vague in my opinion. Like you can die in so many ways, as weird it is to say, and homicide is just like a category within its own. Like even though we are able to find comfort in knowing that we're not alone, it's also important to know that our journeys are very different. Everybody experiences their own type of grief, which is also my like eye-opening. It was eye-opening for me because of finding different survivors on this page. It's definitely inspired me to want to share their story and to reach out to other people, because it just shows that there's so many people that don't have that ability to like share. Like I feel like sometimes we're in a position where people just don't want to listen to us, and it's difficult to raise homicide awareness when no one is willing to give us that chance to talk. I want to talk about my plans for LVM Advantage. Just like a brief thing, nothing like too specific, but this will always be the same goal that I have every single year, no matter what. I want to be able to reach out to more survivors, use this platform as a place, as a safe space for them where they can talk about their story and share their voice about what they're going through, and to raise homicide awareness for our family members that we've lost. And, like I said, for us survivors, because a lot of people would rather hear more about the actual crime itself or the people that are committing the crime rather than what the families are going through. And that is something I will continue talking about because it's very true. But yeah, just making sure that other people should understand that survivors deserve to talk about their story. Their participation is also super important. In order to raise homicide awareness, you don't only need survivors, you need those who haven't experienced homicide. That's how you, raise awareness, for others that aren't going through it, because it's kind of like one of those things where if you don't experience it, then you don't really care about it. But, this is something that people should care about, because if you're going to be interested in the crime, you need to understand the family as well. I want to talk about my hope for 2022. It's for myself. The LVM podcast is more of like a personal podcast for me, because this is where I talk about my grief of losing my mother. The previous episodes that I have recorded about losing her, it was specifically, going through that journey of finding out about her murder, like what I went through, like during that week, during that day, during her funeral, during everything, and just like processing and telling others. Those previous episodes were specifically about that time period. During this year, I want to challenge myself a little bit more about not holding back as much, just being open to what I am feeling and being honest to myself. Because, as weird as it is, I feel like sometimes when feelings can be really strong and really deep, we kind of tend to like shove that away. Even though that can work temporarily, I think that also makes it even stronger. And it pretty much will like just burst. This year really for me personally is about growth and really evaluating myself and listening to myself more and accepting that. And whether I like to admit it or not, sometimes, the loss of my mother has impacted me in many ways. I not only lost, my mother, but, it was literally losing, part of my life and my identity. Technically, there were many days where I felt like I didn't have a mother, and, even more days where I just felt like I didn't know myself. And I usually avoided thinking about it because confronting myself was challenging and it would make me very frustrated and angry. And why would I want to put myself in that position when I had so many other things to focus on? But, like I said before, this year I want to confront myself, actually accept it and go through with it. I feel like, I'm finally at a point in my journey where I should be able to accept those thoughts, not have those thoughts, push me back to where I need to avoid everything. This time where I need to accept certain things in my life. As I was mentioning before about taking accountability of myself and keeping myself on track, I feel like when people go through a traumatic event in life, it physically can affect you. And because of that, we sometimes subconsciously react to things. We may end up doing more damage than we actually want, but because of the trauma that we've been through, we kind of like self-sabotage in a way. I feel like I'm being more aware about myself and my actions and why I do the things the way I do. But I feel like there's a certain point in life where we can't use our past as an excuse for why we do things now. For example, because of like the distant relationship I had with my mother, I started blaming a lot of things that happened in my life. And, the thing is, it's like, yes, I can feel angry about this. And yes, the distant relationship I had with my mother did affect, this and this and this. But, moving forward from this point in my life, I can do better and improve and, change those patterns where I can make the life, that I want and that I need. That's part of growing up in a way. We have to be able to take care of ourselves at some point. And I truly believe that, a part of my grief journey is definitely tending to my inner child because that is something that needs work on. If I'm going to be honest, it's important to know everyone's journey is different. My journey is definitely different. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And when it comes to LVM Advantage, I believe that it can be used in everyone's life. That is up to each person, personally. When I started LVM Advantage, my personal definition of LVM Advantage was different, during last year about how I was using it in my life. And during this year of 2022, I want to use, LVM Advantage in a way that I need to take accountability for myself. I feel like accountability should be, or is a part of grief, It's a part of healing. Like I said before, it is perfectly fine on how you want to grieve and how you do things. But it's like, I feel like it does come to a certain point where we need to do better for ourselves. Like, it's not even a bad thing. I don't even know if I'm making any sense right now. I just want to be able to grow and do what is best for me, and everyone's grief journey is different. That's all. And if you are a survivor, that has let me share your story on my page, thank you so much. It's really comforting for others to know that they're not alone in how they feel. And for those that are new and don't know much about my story and how I've started my grief journey, you can check out, the previous episodes. There's only 10 episodes that you can go through to, learn more about my mom, or me losing my mother, I should say, and how I went through that journey. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have, the links somewhere around. And yeah, I look forward to, having all of you join me during this journey during 2022. This is kind of like a thing to keep myself accountable, and I'm sure you guys will keep me in my place. I have a few things planned for 2022 in order to raise homicide awareness, and I'm looking forward for all of your support and energy, because let me tell you something, this first month of 2022 has already been harsh, I should say, but we gotta push through. And yeah, I thank you guys for watching this video and listening to what I have to say and reflecting. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching this or listening to this on a podcast streaming platform, thank you so much. I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye.